we're a little late. Look at this, though. I'm getting the coffee ready. And why is that? Because today is Tuesday, February 15th, 2022, and it's going to be the final episode of our secularism series right here on Paleocrat Diaries. Ow! Are you pumped, by the way? I hope so. I hope you're pumped. And you want to know why? Because today is the day that the Lord has made, and we got to rejoice. We got to be glad in it, because it's wicked bad. Right? There's tons of stuff all around us every single day that are wicked bad. So what do? We take a knee for Christ the King, and we resolve deep inside every single day to never give up, to keep on smiling, and to remember that we too one day shall die. So what do we have to do in the meantime? You got to dream big. You got to dream bigger thoughts. It's what my daughter said. It's what my daughter said. It's what she lived. It's what my sister lives, by the way. My sister lives that. And my sister's here, actually. I've asked all of you to pray for her. I've told you about her journey with cancer. I know a lot of you have been praying for Phoebe. And her and my dad are actually in the house. It's one of the reasons why we're late. The other reason is, well, it's Kaiser time. So get that coffee ready, straight to the dome, through the straw, scientifically verified. You been keeping up with the nonsense? Have you been keeping up with the nonsense with, Taylor Marshall? And Patrick Coffin? Did you see that dude's video? That was the most boomer thing I've ever seen in my life. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. It was so terrible. All right, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, it's a little bit off the rails today, not gonna lie. Part of that is because it's Tuesday. Did you catch that? I did. Think about it. Mimicking Patrick Coffin, what a joke. But no, Tuesday, the reason why is yesterday, I don't know if you caught it, but yesterday was a premiere, right, for our boy, Michael Lofton, over at Catholic Answers. And so he was over there talking, in fact, about Patrick Coffin and the 7 reasons that Francis is an antipope and all that. He was talking about it. I saw another Catholic Answers video talking about it that was excellent. That was actually kind of a fun video, that one. Making the joke about so much of the argument being that maybe Pope Benedict had his fingers crossed behind his back. He's like, yes, I'm resigning, and yes, this is the case, but what you didn't know, mister, is I had double fingers crossed. It's what those arguments really boil down to. Some real, and I know that they kept saying Gnostic, and I know that there's element of that, but esoteric might have just been better. It's just this real esoteric thing. They're always, well, look at the symbols. Did you catch the little crumb over here? Because Patrick Coffin, I mean, that cat is literally the new and not so improved Catholic Q. That's what he is. He's a decoder. He's got his decoder ring. He's got the glasses, and he's looking around for all the symbols and the breadcrumbs, and he's decoding it for you. And assuming that maybe you caught it too. And I'm being serious. That was actually a part of his video talking about a speech that was done, right? Benedict saying, "Pray that I don't flee the wolves." And I mean, you hear that and you say, okay. And what does he say? He goes, "Did you catch that?" And you're waiting. I'm listening. I'm like, yeah, I read it. I remember when that happened. He goes, "I did too. Think about it." I'm like, what are you talking about, you weirdo? You weirdo. And the music, too. The music behind him the entire time. I mean, what kind of elevator music track was he using for that? What kind of elder care home did he go to steal their records? I'm like, man, do better. Do better than that. It was really bad. So, but we're not going to talk too much about that today. I want to thank everybody real quick in the YouTube comment section. Very happy to see all of you there. Always happy, of course, to see all those wolf emojis. Alexander, God save the Kaiser. Thank you very much, my man. Thank you very much. God does amazing things all the time for the Kaiser. It's true, right? Lots and lots of grace. Let's put it that way. That's lots of patience, lots of grace, and amazing people all around, And if you hear that, by the way, if you hear that out, the sound of little kids and the sound of all that, those are just a handful of the amazing graces that God has put into my life, right? So let's see here. VM, doubt it will start on time. Why is this even a question? Why do you even talk that way, VM? Right? It never starts that way on time. Oh, wait a second. I know who VM is. Yeah, I'm going to ignore VM. I know who you are. Yeah, of course, my mega hot half Korean beauty queen wife, Angela, let everybody know the reason for the delay. Very grateful that she let everybody know that. Let's see. Jedediah, being late is fine. City workers in the house is the unacceptable part. Yeah, because we had people coming in having to do our stuff with our water. I didn't know they were coming at 11. I'm out there brushing my teeth, and my wife's like, oh, you might not be able to use your water now. I'm like, what? I'm glad I wasn't in the shower. Glad I wasn't in the shower when that happened. I'd have been like, no! Turn it back on, like right now, at least for another 30 seconds. Right? Take care of business. Let's see here. Let's see. Enslaved by the Truth, St. Gallen Mafia took him out. TikTok. Yeah, by the way, didn't it have a little bit of feeling like they were TikToking it up there? I feel like, the whole pop set A thing at this point, Taylor Marshall and Coughlin and all them, they're just TikToking it up 24 Central. 24. They're just like constantly TikToking it up, doing their thing. And no, not even remotely respectable. And here's the point. I got people, we talked a lot about it, by the way, over at the Wolfpack chat. And just so that people know what I'm talking about when I say that, let's go ahead and pop that one up here for a second. So this is the Telegram. I encourage everybody, if you enjoy the show, and I hope you do, right? Make sure, go over and check out our Telegram page. You can find, I don't know if the links are in the description below. It should be like the letter T.me/the Wolfpack chat. That's it. That's for the Wolfpack chat. That's where it's 24/7. It really is. I mean, there's people in there all the time. We have video calls, voice calls all the time. So every day, there's probably at least, one of them, many times two, that we'll have throughout the day, and people just join in and engage. But, if you enjoy that, make sure to go over and check that out. And, of course, this right here is Paleocrat Diaries on Telegram. This is just me. Right. In fact, right there, you can see we were talking. River Run was in the room last night, so we were talking with him. You've got all different things, sometimes just posts, sometimes pictures, sometimes voice chats, you name it. Of course, you can message me in DM. It's better than email. And you can also, of course, you can hit me up. You can actually contact me by phone through Telegram. And so it's the one-stop shop. It's the one-stop shop for this. But it's been one of those conversations that has been going on. Let me go ahead and get back to this. So it's been one of those conversations. And I told people, I said, look, I know people are all up in arms about it. And to a degree, people have to be, because at this point, for all intents and purposes, Taylor Marshall is, functionally speaking, he's like the Tertullian. He's like the Tertullian of the set A argument at this point, right? He's a guy who many people look and say, look, you were a big influence in my life, and you helped to teach me a lot of things about the faith. I've come to really appreciate you and like you as a guy, and now you're going off the rails. And so, it's a tough deal. And there are people debating it out and talking about, how should we treat this? How should we understand this? When he's making an argument about heretics ipso facto losing the throne, and then saying, oh yeah, this fits the bill for Pope Francis, but I didn't say the magic naughty word of sedevacantism. So what? So what? What a stupid argument. I mentioned before, I said, people like him, it's like saying that somebody who you talk to and they say, oh yeah, I believe in abortion, and I believe in it's your right to choose at any point, and it's only between you and your doctor, and you should not make laws about that, and all of this. And then you say, well, you're pro-choice, and they go, no, I didn't say that. Yes, you did, literally in so many words. So many. You did. And it's the same thing with him. But you got people, they're stuck in the magic word talk. Well, he hasn't said the magic word to put in the key and release Pandora's box. You're like, no, he already has. He already has. If you want to know more about that argument, though, and why what he's saying is such poo-poo trash, if you would like to know that, I did my last episode over on Meaning of Catholic, which I might just separate from the snake handler portion, because I talked about snake handlers, is our second of, I think two. I think that's the last one on them. But I talked about snake handlers, and before that, it was about this whole issue. I spent an entire hour just literally beating the daylights out of Taylor Marshall's position. So if you want to know why his position is poo-poo trash, without following the merry-go-round, everybody else is. Everybody else, man, it's the merry-go-round. They're like, okay, he made these claims. We're going to go and we're going to address every single claim. I'm like, do you guys realize that is literally insanity? Do you even get that? If your apologetic method is that you're going to simply go after each individual argument and each individual claim rather than sticking with founding principles, presuppositions, and models, paradigms, if you are not going to do that, system analysis, if you're not going to do that, let me just let you know, there's about 20 bazillion arguments that they've got. 20 bazillion. And it's the kind of argument where if you're wrong on one of them, then it's over. Ipso facto, it's over. It's over. And for each one, it's relativistic because different people will have different reasons why they say, oh yeah, that's heresy. Yeah, I put on my monocle and I was looking. I saw the ingredients of the papal statement and I found out that there's poison in that. And if you believe that, and if you said it, ipso facto, we don't have a pope anymore. It's garbage. It's garbage. And I lay it out for an hour as to why. And that should be, honest to goodness, if you destroy their foundations and their premise, from that point on, if you want to talk about individual claims, have at it. You want to go down that merry-go-round with the sensationalist news of Catholic media, you go ahead and you do it. But at least we've established that those kind of arguments happen within the bosom of the church. That's what it is. And so you want to know more about that argument? I'm not going to waste too much time here because we have a lot to talk about. And I have to apologize. I have to apologize in advance. I got to do it because what ended up happening was we had some people from the city come in, okay? So some people from the city, they were inside working on the water and everything. And my sister and my dad, they came. They're here. My dad is flying out, I believe, today. And so needed a ride to the airport. And they wanted to spend some time. They're going to go out to eat. Of course, they're doing that during the show. They're going to a really delicious all-you-can-eat Chinese food place. It's my favorite one. I love you guys. Think of the sacrifices I'm making, right? And it just happened to do this because we had to reschedule from yesterday. So it's a bummer. And I hope that they buy me food. Buy me something, please. Oh, and my wife, she loves me. I really, really hope that she buys me something or make sure that your boy's fed. Okay, you got to do it. Don't tell me about the peanut butter in the closet. Don't do that. Go get the peanut butter, Jeremiah. So, but because of that, one of the other things that ended up happening was tragically, I wasn't able to take pictures of the screenshots. Okay, so there are no screenshots. We're going through this book here by James K.A. Smith. It's called How Not to Be Secular. This book played a huge role in my life, okay? It was one of those books that, when I came back to the faith in 2017, there were a lot of different people, including my sister, my dad, my mom, my grandmother, people who played a role in my life, my friends, okay? I had friends, Atticus and Devin, Mike. I had a number of people. But I also had individuals that were kind of from afar, okay? Including my goddaughter, Agnes, including her dad and mom. And so they were part of that. Another buddy of mine who was a really big role in my life before I had even become a Catholic at all. And he's the one actually who sent this book to me, okay? And so it was one of those things where, there are many different forces that come into play that helped me to find my way back. And of course, the most significant ones in the timeline would be my daughter, Samantha, her life and death with cancer, and the entire Team Tight Answer family, my wife and children. And the three children, my three kids, the older three, because now we have two more. We've got Ignatius, we got little Louis, and we got Wolfgang, okay? So we've got two littler ones too now, but the ones that remained after our firstborn died, those three played a really big role in my life. In fact, I just finished the chapter talking about the conversations that I had with them after our daughter died, the conversations I had with them that bit by bit really made me question the hypocrisy in my life. And really not even just that, but to kind of really focus on those things that I knew were true the whole time. Things that were still in my life, things that I longed for or I missed, a kind of malaise in my life that was there because I felt that something was missing, and I was trying to piece things together in order to create that and to somehow fill that void in my life, including things as simple as groupishness. Being part of a group that has an idea that's bigger than you and that has some kind of authority or significance in that way. And not just a political activism thing, but something that truly is able to give you a sense of fullness in your life. That's a real problem. And the secular age can't deal with that. We've talked about the various reasons why. But here's the thing. The question becomes, how then do you live? If we've established that we live in a secular age, and I think that Charles Taylor has done an excellent job. I think it's one of those things that we can all look around and see it. I think even so-called traditionalists can see it. That when, people who kind of pride themselves on being more old-fashioned and saying, I live and think and I move and I have my being in this kind of world that's traditional, just like before. And yet so much of what we do, even traditional people, is naturalistic, materialistic. And we don't even see it. Scientistic. We don't even see it. Technocratic. Doesn't matter. Across the board, democratic. Even down to the idea of publishing books or having lay apostolates. Or constantly going out and kind of assuming powers and positions that are not yours. And assuming that we need to put on the monocle to analyze, to go deep diving. I went into the scrolls and I was looking at all of them, and I feel that the hierarchy matches up with it. And because of that, it gets my stamp of approval. As if it needs it. As if that's even how it operated. We've lost track of the fact that our positions as Christian people, our positions are not based on what we can read in the scroll. They're based on historical events and people, things that happened that those scrolls talk about. Those scrolls talk about historical things, historical events. And by scrolls, I hope you know what I'm talking about. So the scriptures, they're talking about actual historical things, events that took place. And because of that, that's why we believe the way we do. And that doesn't take my monocle. That doesn't take my interpretive technique. It's just simply, to be quite frank, it's a fact. And I think we lose that. It's why it's hard to believe in a revelatory religion. It's easy to believe in a rationalistic one. It's harder to just say, that literally, this is revelation. This is what we've been taught. This is what the faith is, and it requires a notion that you accept revelation. It's why we accept the Gospels, for example. Nobody's going through and saying, well, it was completely in harmony. There's no issues here. Not even grammatical. We're good. And that's why we accept them. St. Augustine didn't say that. And yet that's kind of where we are. So even for the people who would like to consider themselves very traditional, they often find themselves thinking and moving and having their being in much the same way as all of those in the secular age. And I hope you guys answer this question. Do you want to see more Paleocrat on RNT? I hope you answer yes to that. I do. Hold on, let me see. Yes, I do. I do want to see more of that. Yeah, get out of there. I already answered that question. So, the thing is, yeah, I answered. I would like to. And by the way, just so everybody knows, you will be seeing more of me on RNT. It's already confirmed. It's already confirmed, okay? And so I don't know how frequently it's going to be. The goal is to have it more than once a week. I may even mix in a late night show. I might do that because I'm up late anyway. It's one of the reasons I struggle doing stuff over at Meaning of Catholic in the morning on Mondays. They want me waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I said, I don't know about that. I don't know. Once a week, I can do it. So, but we're gonna finish on the question of how then do we live? How are we able to live in a secular age that's not in a secular way? What does it take? Is it possible? And to what extent is it possible? And I'm open to differences of opinion. As I said, the guy who wrote this book he's a Calvinist. He's Reformed. He teaches over at Calvin College. I have certain disagreements with him. But I also think he did the best job of anybody summarizing, and I respect this guy, Charles Taylor, a Roman Catholic, who I would also have some disagreements with. The author of this book, a Calvinist, who teaches actually up the road. I want to reach out to him. I want to have him on the show, and I want to interview him and have some questions and leave it open to people too. But if you have differences with what I'm saying in the presentation of this, please let me know. Let me know. I always tell people that. I say, look, I'm not some leader coming down a mountain with the scrolls and the Ten Commandments coming down. You better believe this. That's not how I approach this. I'm your brother in the Lord. You're my brother and sister in the Lord. Okay? I hope that we can become friends, be part of the same wolf pack. All that stuff. And we're all part of the same faith. We'll spend eternity together in heaven. That sort of thing. So if you are able to say, look, I think you went off the rails with this, or I think you took a wrong take, or you emphasized it wrongly, or just flat out wrong. You say, look, bro, I think you're just really wrong on this particular thing. Let me know. I benefit from that. And I'm more than willing to admit if I've been wrong, and I'm willing to say sorry. I've proved it many times. So, okay. So, in talking about the eminent frame, and I'll just go ahead and I'll read from this, okay? So, Taylor goes on the offense. Finally, at the end, Taylor is on the offense. Because so far, he's just been laying the groundwork, talking about what is secularism? What is the secular age? What does it mean? What are the different positions of it? And he came to the conclusion that a lot of this just has to do with the opening of a space of possibility. Where you say, there's at least it's created the conditions of our imaginary, what we're able to think is possible, have been changed enough that we can now say, well, I don't believe that over there, but I mean, it kind of seems at least like they've got some points. It's not so much my way or the highway anymore. And there's this, and it's accompanied by a kind of circle of empathy, this ever-expanding thing. But he says that Taylor does this, going on offense, but it's not in an apologetic mode. Christianity, in order to try to prove Christianity to be true. But instead, it's undercutting the confidence of the secularist take on the world, showing it to be a take, a construal, a reading. In sum, the final part of a secular age is an attempt to get secularists to own up to inhabiting a secular 3 age. It's the idea of saying, look, you're trying to get the unbeliever to move from a position that says it's because of the subtraction theory, saying that people used to believe in a God over here, well, that was proved wrong and it left this, and this was proved wrong and it left that, and the default position is secularism. And that's just true. And he's challenging that. And so he's doing a kind, I mentioned in the book when I was reading through the actual secular age book, it's like, what is it, 800 pages or something? Reading through it, you can see in there presuppositionalism over and over and over, because he's using at least one form of that. He's attacking the underlying assumptions, right? And the surrounding imaginary. He's attacking that in a kind of negative apologetic to even get to the place where they say, look, it's not as sturdy as you think. Your boat is full of holes and it's literally kind of going down here. I don't think he takes it far enough. But I think he would leave that up to the apologist to make that case. He's simply saying we need to make it such that there's a loss of confidence in this notion that the world is just secular, that secularism is the only school in town in understanding the world that we have, because it's become the only school in town, even in a way that we're not necessarily actively thinking about, but we just kind of accept. It's in this context that Taylor coins what will be a crucial concept going forward, the idea of an eminent frame. This metaphorical concept, alluding to a frame that both boxes in and boxes out, it encloses and it focuses. This frame constitutes a natural order to be contrasted to a supernatural one, or it's an eminent one over against a possible transcendent one. So you hear this in conversations a lot. And even just in day-to-day life, there's a feeling, and it's easy, isn't it? Because we're creatures. I would say it's easier in many ways for us to maintain a position of naturalism. Supernaturalism is harder. Oh, look at this. Hey, Mama. Wolfgang came to visit me. I have no idea, but I got Wolfgang in here. He just rolled up in. He's like, hey, Papa, check it out. I'm here. Say hi. Hold on, say hi. Everybody, you say hi too, Mama. You say hi too.
I'm behind Wolfie. So.
Yeah, look, right here. Look.
Well, I know, but
There we go. Now you can see it. Oh, yep, he does that every time. You want to get into that, huh? Yeah, lock that bad boy up. He just rolls up in there. What do you have? Oh, hold on.
Magnets.
Yeah, he brought these in. I may as well show him. Tridentine Brewery. Okay. Quartermaster. This is the DS Irae. That's my favorite magnet. He took that right off the fridge. Yep. Tridentine Brewing. Amazing place, by the way. I still want to go down there. We'll find out. So, but anyway, I love my kids. I love my wife. Yeah. Let me see. All right. But the idea is that, it's easier sometimes for us to because we're creatures. It's easy for us to fall into the trap of just waking up and living another day, another dollar, and really thinking in a way and kind of functioning as if that's all there really is. I mean, it's hard to get up for work and it's hard to get up for church, but at least your rewards are more immediate at work, right? It's more eminent because you're like, look, I got my managers here. I'm going to make some money. And you're not being told that your reward is on the other side of your death. So it's easier. So it's easier to fall prey to those things that emphasize that part of us. And we lose track oftentimes of the transcendent. In part because you have to actually imagine it. There's a part of that when you look up at the Eucharist, for example. You have to be able to have kind of spiritual eyeballs. You have to make an act of faith about that. We're encouraged to do ejaculatory prayers. To say, look, my God, my Lord and my God. To say that, to make an affirmation in that way. Because it's not so easy. So he asked these two questions, right? What tips our orientation within the Eminent Frame? Okay, so what would tip our orientation in there? Why are some inclined to live as if it were closed? What inclines others to inhabit it as if it were open? What motivates these stances? Whence these two different basic orientations? Note the existential emphasis here. This is not treated as a question of knowledge or belief, but rather a question of how we live in the Eminent Frame. Anyone familiar with my work? I mean, go back and look. I talk about functionalist definitions all the time. I talk about David Sloan Wilson and my appreciation for him in that even when talking about something like Darwinism from a completely different worldview, right? That he can still see in the natural order of things a powerful meaning for religion. Same thing with Jonathan Haidt. Okay? And to say, what is it that makes religion, even for the people who are not very thoughtful? Because the truth is, whether we like it or not, you're tuned into this channel, by the way, because you like to think deeply about topics, about theology and stuff. The vast majority of people on this planet don't. And God made them. And it's not just sinful. I think there's like this weird Confucianist thing going on with a lot of Christian people where they just think that every Christian person should be a scholar. God didn't make it that way. God wasn't biting his nails wondering why there weren't books being published all over the place for a long time. And the printing press took so long to make. That most people lived their life of faith. They lived it through their everyday affairs. They lived it through the practical day-to-day things. They didn't have to sit around with a monocle on all day, going through the ancient scrolls. searching into the numbers to try to find out the patterns. They were everyday folks. And by the numbers, it seems like God cares about them an awful lot and that they play a very big role. But that role is, what does it mean to me? How does that apply to my life? Why should I care? Those are practical considerations. And if our answer to that is strictly one that's abstract or just simply tossing it out to the future, I think we're missing the point. Not just the point of the question, but the point of what the very faith we're trying to present and the faith that that person may genuinely be desiring to hear from you. And not in a bad way. To say, how then shall we live? Okay, I've downloaded the information to my head. How does that apply to what I do with my hands, to the way that I move my feet, to the way that I talk, to the things that I listen to the way that I raise my kids? Practical considerations. It's the reason we did the Lasant series. And if you want to know, you say, well, what do you mean by that? Like an apologetics for everyday life. I have episodes on that, on Meaning of Catholic. And I'm going to see if we can go ahead and just on both channels create playlists that go with different books that I've done. And so that way we can set up the playlist and even cue it in such a way that, and I might just do it at Paleocrat on YouTube. Just make it so that it starts at the beginning of the presentation and it doesn't have any of the intros and stuff. But I talk about it. The everyday life, the everyday person. Because that's what St. Peter's talking about. It's what St. Peter's talking about in 1 Peter 3. People are like, no, he's talking about these really deep considerations. And you're like, if you want to make it a both and. He's talking about how you live. The reasons for your hope could be as simple as, you know what? I don't want to die. I don't want to die. There's something inside of me that doesn't want to die. There's something inside of me that would like to live forever with the Lord. Maybe see grandpa and grandma. That's a reason for the hope that you have. It's not simply, we need to go and get into these deep philosophical conversations with people. You know how many people come to the faith for simple considerations that they lost a loved one that they want to see again? I told my kids, I said, you come to me with really intense arguments in the future. If you ever, perchance, sadly, but statistically, it happens. I'm an example of this happening. That for a time, a child walks away, comes back to the dad with really good arguments, and says, look, these are powerful arguments, and they sound persuasive. I told my kids, I pointed up at the family picture, and I said, you got to go through that. So that is, my daughter's in the center. It was the picture before her 17-hour brain surgery. I said, I have to see her again, buddy. So you'll have to be able to say, you'll have to be able to give me a reason why that's just worthless. And if you tell me that, I'll say, I'd rather die trying. Is that a perfect love for the Lord? Is that a fear of, that we're afraid a little bit because we dread the loss of heaven and the pains of hell? Yeah, of course. We want to make it to heaven. We want to see those people. We don't want to go to hell. It's not just a perfect love. Most people don't. And God loves us. And then a more meta question. Why do some recognize that their construal, or their frame, as open or closed is just that? A construal, a take on things. In particular, why do secularists so confidently assume that this is just the way things are? And obvious as the only thing to conclude, right? Why do they do that? What's the reason for that? And that's part of the apologetic method in dealing with this, to attack those things and say, look, you have no reason, you have no ground to stand on for this. Because the eminent frame is, according to Charles Taylor, the eminent frame is the sensed context in which we develop our beliefs. So the conclusion is this. Taylor suggests that our basic motivations or our orientations within the frame are not necessarily ratiocinative conclusions that we've thought through, okay? So these are not things that most people have even thought through. It's like osmosis. They live and they move and they have their being in this world. They don't think through, how did we get here? It's just part of the imagination that they have, okay? We know this. We see this a lot with conversations regarding the Zoomers living completely within the world where there was social media, for example, or internet, electric speed, interconnectedness around the world, hyperconvergence of mass mediums. And you say, what kind of impact does that have on a person compared to someone like me who remembers rotary phones and Commodores? I remember, what is it? Was it a Commodore 64? I remember the day and age. As I said, rotary phones, Atari. You know, my dad, he's old enough to remember the horse and buggies. I don't know if he's listening out there. I hope he is. He's going to beat on the door. He's like, how dare you? How dare you, son? I was around in the Model T era. I love my dad. But he was around even before that. You know? He was around even before that. My grandma. I mean, so like each age, we know what's being talked about. If you're born already, neck deep into the acceptance, right, and the pervasiveness and saturation of a technique, of something that is in society, that has been around long enough that you've never known any other world other than that. But that in fact is what is going on with secularism, what we call secularism. Right? How you inhabit the frame is less of a fruit of deduction and it's more of a vibe. It's less a reasoned position or articulated worldview and more of a Wittgensteinian picture that holds us captive precisely because it's not conscious. It's a background to our thinking, within whose terms it's carried on, but which is often largely unformulated, and to which we can frequently, just for this reason, imagine no alternative. It's one of those things, I think, talking about the imaginaries that would be present in a world where you have cell phones. The conversations, how could you possibly live without that? Are you serious? I mean, didn't you just get lost all the time? When you got in the car, I mean, was everybody just confused about where they were going? They have no clue. How'd you wake up in the morning? What? How did you entertain yourself? I mean, holy cow. If there's no Facebook, I mean, what did you do with your life? And it's confusing to people. It's confusing. And yeah, the Commodore 64. Lord B. Dannon said, Lord B. Dannon, yep, confirmed it. Thank you. I appreciate it. But you hear that where once something is settled in and it's been accepted, even if it's not critically thought out. I mean, I think it's one of the stunning things about digital minimalism is that people will go and they'll read a book about digital minimalism and they'll be like, I never even thought about that. I never even thought about it. But yet they had a lot of beliefs about it. And beliefs that weren't just beliefs, they were beliefs that determined things that they bought, ways that they used their time, ways that they judged other people for what they did or did not do. And it's a great example. And we have to show that there's alternatives to that, even if, and it runs a spectrum. And we'll stick with it with the comparison. You could say, well, the Amish are an obvious example of that, of something radically different. And in fairness to them, they even have kind of a tech nerd too, that evaluates new technology and relays that to people within the group and says, look, this is what this is. They debate that issue. But that's why they often have like a community phone, for example. They won't use it unless it's an emergency. But they're not sending smoke signals to the cops or to the ambulances that show up there. Yeah. Imagine the police force. They have like somebody out there all the time with binoculars. And you're like, hey, Sarge, what are you doing? And you're like, I'm doing my job. What's your job? I'm the smoke signal detector. What do you mean? Yeah, well, we got Amish people over there, and they don't use phones, so we just have smoke signals. They got a little box. You're like, what's that? And you're like, that's for the carrier pigeon. That's for the carrier pigeon. Taylor works with another important distinction. We can either inhabit the eminent frame as a Jamesian open space. So this idea that, well, it's entirely open, okay? It's entirely open. I'm going to take that off for a second. Or, right, where we recognize the contestability of our take on things and even feel the pull and tug of cross pressures of the alternative, or will fail to recognize that ours is a take and instead will settle for a spin. I think that I don't agree with this. Well, to an extent, I'd say, okay, so in the secular age, as people understand it, not as it is, as people understand it, ours is one of many takes. But I don't believe that it's one of many takes. I don't believe in this space out there that it's like, well, my claims are not necessarily describing this neutral space that's been created through a Hegelian dialectic. I don't believe that. To me, that's a little bit nonsense. A little bit cuckoo pant weirdo stuff. Okay? However, I know what it means to say, if we don't recognize that in other people and say, look, that's how they treat this, then yes, it would be a kind of spin, an overconfident picture within which we can imagine it being otherwise, and thus smugly dismissing those who disagree. I'm more concerned with the idea of just simply not smugly disregarding those we disagree with. I think it's fair to balance things out. I think it's reasonable to say that on the one hand, that person genuinely wishes that he could find an answer, and on the other hand, at the same time, that part of him is actively, knowingly suppressing the truth in exchange for a lie. You have to be able to say both those things, in my estimation. And it's one of those tensions. And it's a tension that I've talked about many times to say, look, a tension that happens in a world that is comprised of a creator, the created, and within the created order, that you have not God, so stuff that's not God at all, and stuff that is not God, but like God. And in that world, in that interplay between those things, that you are going to have an extraordinary amount of tension for the not God, but like God category. Because both those things are present, physical and spiritual, aspiring to the great and also desiring to do bad, in the need of an incarnational theology that purifies us and raises us up to godliness. So you have to be able to do both. And I think it depends on what you're doing. If you're in an argument with somebody who's simply making claims, and you're just in a more philosophically oriented argument, go to town on the idea of actively suppressing. Go to show the underlying presuppositions that they're playing. I no see it. Me no see, me no hear it. Those don't exist because I close my eyes and my ears. No. Baloney. On the other hand, if you're talking to the average Joe, emphasize one over the other. It doesn't mean embrace the one at the total exclusion of the other. Emphasize the other. Emphasize the idea that you're being empathetic because you're face to face. It's a more personal, interpersonal conversation. Man. Taylor is most interested in considering and contesting the spin of closure, which is hegemonic in the academy. So he's not even talking about it from the perspective, by the way, of Christian people. I would say that I think that Ronald Knox does in his chapters about proving God in his Lost Works. Which, by the way, I'll talk about that. I'll probably just do that either next episode or something like that. Maybe one of the additional episodes I do here. We'll talk about this. Three or four chapters of that. It's excellent. In fact, it is prophetic. I think we're doing good, by the way. I think we're doing good at fulfilling the prophecy. Did you catch it? I did. Think about it. Yeah. So, yeah, I think we're doing really good, guys. We've caught the vision. He's passed the torch, right? To the pack. Not to me, to the pack. He said, look, it's gonna take a village. It's gonna take a pack. And you're like, yeah, we got you. We got you, buddy. But he's talking about the spin of closure in the academy. This is the spin that's dominant amongst intellectuals and elites who would actually see the open take on the Eminent Frame as a spin of their own closed take as this is just the way things are. So he's talking about that he's going against the idea within secularism where you have in the academy that's just the way it is. It's not some kind of an open thing. It's not open. It's not one of many reasonable alternatives or options, but this is just the way things are. And if you disagree, well, tough luck. Tough luck. You're just an old-fashioned person of faith, and you're going the way of the dinosaur. It's over for you. We see that caricatured out to the extreme in the movie God's Not Dead. I mean, there are professors like that, but that, I mean, look, I was an unbeliever, and that was like, when that movie came out, I actually watched them. Actually, the producers, or the director of God's Not Dead 2, talked to me on my Facebook about things. So, because I talked about it on the radio and stuff. But the thing is that, I look at it and say, it's a caricature. But these people are real, and there is a school of thought like this that believes that, and it's not just the new atheists. I think we can see that in the SJWs. These secular fundamentalists, so to speak, we might say, that they talk about the eminent frame as closed, is to just see it as it really is. And they say that if you think it's open, there's room for faith. You hear that sometimes. I'm making space for faith. If you say that, I'm gonna cry, chop you in the neck. But I know what you're saying. But I making space, make some space for this. That it's wishful thinking. In contrast, Taylor argues that the eminent frame is undetermined, or underdetermined, susceptible to two different takes of contrals. It allows both readings without compelling us to either. Again, I disagree with him. Insofar as it goes, I think that, I don't think we found ourselves in a place that's like, look, you can read this entirely. You can make sense of this entirely with a system that does not accept God. And in fact, not just a God, the Trinitarian God of Revelation. Yeah. That this world, that we are creators in a created order, or that we're creatures, that we have a creator, that there's a creator-creature distinction. We're creatures in this created order, that we live and move and have our being in an order that reflects him. That's not, if what I'm saying is true, then there's no thing outside of that. There's no thing outside of that that's like, wow, but in that place, you have to go to another universe, another reality. Yeah, you'd have to go there. It's a little bit like that. So I don't buy that line. At the same time, we do live in a world, and this is old. This is even, I would contend this is before secular age. The idea that you live in a world where you can do both readings, and that makes sense to people in the day-to-day practical affairs of individuals, that it suffices for them as a reading of things, that goes back to Job. Give me a break. We can see that expressed in Job, because it goes back to the beginning. City of God, city of man. Some people feel that there was no need. They could read the world in such a way that it didn't require them to call upon the name of the Lord and to make sacrifice. In fact, the sin of Eve, in fact, is this. The idea that she could imagine a world where that made perfect sense. Even if it was just for a moment, a fleeting moment. It was long enough to say, look, Adam, you should check this out. It's pretty good. And so in that place, they're imagining a world where, yes, it would make sense that I could eat this and not die. That maybe God is a trickster. Maybe he didn't really mean what he said about that. Maybe he was hiding things from me that I might actually be able to do and to know if I ate this fruit. Okay. By the way, in the comments, somebody was talking about Brew City 2, making that some comment. I don't know if he deleted it or what happened, but if somebody could just let me know. Again, what does that have to do with the topic? Please stay on topic. I don't know what the topic was. Yeah. By the way, Laura B. Dannon, I'm very grateful that you enjoy this. I pop that one back up real quick. I'm glad you enjoy this. This is actually one of the more casual episodes. We didn't even do the alert system, the alert system music that we normally do. We have music that kind of breaks up different sections of the show, and that's when the didgeridoo's going off. You know, that's when all the different sounds, right? We got the people blasting the shofar. We got the people doing the wow, wow, wow with the didgeridoo. Folks with that long Ricola horn, the shofar, all that, letting the world know. You know, we got people letting carrier pigeons out, right, left and right, letting the world know the Paleocrat Diaries is on the air. We skipped that today. So normally it's a little bit zanier, right? It's a little bit, it can get kind of crazy. It can get pretty nuts. Taylor's more effective epistemology, an effective A, or better, his hermeneutic, points out that our take is not something reasoned to so much as it is something we reason from. It's an overall sense of things. It's something of a hunch. So secularist spin is, in fact, the denial of contestability. And thus, it's a refusal to recognize what we've defined as secularity 3 earlier in the series. Let's see if we can go back to find some of the definitions that he lays out for secularism 1, secularism 2, and secularism 3, just so that we know. Give me a moment. Let me see here. Yeah, I should have just put those on the screen. I wish I had those on hand. Let's see. No, those are 3 features of the imaginary. Yeah, so he has 3 different views, and he says, you know, that there's different takes. Some of those are legitimate. Some of those are not. Okay? And in it, man, oh, that's going to drive me nuts. I don't want to take forever looking for this thing and going through all these pages. But anyway, okay, so maybe I'll have somebody look it up. Secularism, always secular. Okay, yeah, okay. So, secularism, let's see. Number 2, secular begins. So, number 3, but Taylor helpfully articulates a third sense. So, this is what he's talking about, okay? Secularism 3. A society is secular insofar as religious belief or belief in God is understood to be one option among others, and thus contestable. At issue here is a shift in the conditions for belief. And this is happening all the time. I think we've actually enabled that, by the way. I talked about that in my episode on presuppositionalism. Okay, I think it was like on Reason and Theology, I think it was like 3 episodes ago, where we've made some space for the contestability of belief. Let's see. Yeah, if somebody's able to let me know about what was said, I'd love to. I'm willing to answer stuff that doesn't necessarily have to do with staying on topic. I don't mind that. I don't mind that. Let's see. But they like to treat it as if it's not a contestable thing. And so what he's trying to do is to at least get to that place where he's saying that very idea is contestable. That very idea is contestable. And that's as I said, it's part of the two-pronged apologetic. The frame is not essentially or inherently tipped one way or the other. The actual experience of living within Western modernity tends to awaken protests, resistances of various kinds. In this fuller, experiential sense, living within the frame doesn't simply tip you in one direction, but allows you to feel pulled in 2 different ways. A very common experience of living here is that of being cross-pressured between the open and closed perspectives. This is one of those criticisms, and this is important because it comes down to the end, and you say, I don't know how much of an emphasis. I think there's a tendency to place an overemphasis on that, to say, yeah, that hasn't always just been the case. And where did you ever get to the idea that wasn't always the case? That's a defining marker, in fact, of a transcendent thing. And maybe that's part of it. He's saying not so much that I disagree, right? But that even in the olden times, when you had carnival, right? You had these different feasts and things that would take place and times in society where all of a sudden just the pressure valves are let loose. And people can vent because there was a tension between it. There's always been a tension between I do what I don't want to do, and I don't do what I want to do. There's always been a tension between, man, I know that this is true, or I believe that this is true, but the conditions in my life are so bad, the things that I've experienced are so horrendous, that it's easy for me to fall prey to a widely available spectrum of belief. Even if not collectively in groups manifest societally, people know that there is the idea of the godless, the idea of the person who in his heart rejects God and says God's not real. That's old school. We're talking super old school here. Well, I just want to know what Bruce City was saying. I don't know what it was. People are saying, no, Jeremiah believes this, Jeremiah believes that. I just want to know. I don't know what that was. I apologize, by the way. People are like, what, Bruce City, what are you talking about? It's on the screen there. I apologize. Let's see. So Taylor talks about this thing, he calls it a closed world structure. Taylor is actually bent on demythologizing the supposed naturalness of this take, showing us, quote, the illusion of the rational obviousness of the closed perspective. Such supposed obviousness is an attempt to insulate us from the fragilization of our secular age. And isn't it true? And you can see it because the two often work together. You see people, I experience this all the time because of what I do. Okay, so I'm always out there, I'm always making arguments, I'm always making videos. So I'm dealing with folks who don't like what I've got to say. I've got people who don't like what I've got to say. And they'll reply to it. And if I reply at all, in any way, not even mean, but just saying like, I'm not sure how you say that. You know, I don't understand that argument, or I don't really think that that's a very well qualified statement, or how would you understand this at all? If I post that, all of a sudden, man, it's like a meltdown. Fragility. And it plays in two directions. It plays in the, how dare you, Paleocrat? How dare you contest that? This is uncontestable. I can't believe you, man. That thing, the why I want that crowd. But you also got the people, you've also got the people who are the doomers. Oh, man. Like they come on strong. Yeah, man, it's obvious this is true. Secularism, come on, you and your dumb faith, you guys are idiots, man. How dare you say that that miracles are possible? How dare you? And then you bring it up and they're like, oh, man. You know, you're just mean. And they get sad about it. And you're like, dude, whoa. You know, it's like the person, it reminds me all the time. And I don't know if I mentioned this on this show. It reminds me of Wimp Lo, right? Wimp Lo, it's a classic kung fu movie, one of the greatest maybe of all time. And what is it called? It's going to drive me nuts. Kung Pao. Kung Pao. Show me your mouth. Kung Pao. There's a guy in there, Wimp Lo. And he thinks he's like tough. He thinks he's the chosen one. Okay? But they trained him on how to fight, and they trained him wrong as a joke. But he doesn't get that it's a joke. You know, so he's constantly getting his butt kicked. So that's one side of that. One side of that is the person who thinks that they're super tough. And they, you know, that they're like, yeah, I can take him on, but it's actually not that hard to deal with that. With that person. The other one is also feeling very tough because they've come to the conclusion that there's no such thing as miracles. That's like fairy tale nonsense. And they're out there on Facebook with all their friends because their friends are like congratulating them. But the moment that somebody comes against them, the fragility comes out. Fragile. Like that leg lamp from Christmas Story. They come out totally fragile. They're lit up real bright. They're super duper woke. However, they're fragile. And they will shatter. Just barely even touching. You're like, whoa, dude, I didn't realize that. And that goes in different directions. They either flip out and get mad. I'm going to block you. They need to insulate themselves. And they insulate themselves by defriending people, dropping them left and right. And yeah, let's see. We have to point out the fact that it's not so obvious. And this is one of those things where, there's different takes on that. If you're talking to somebody and you say, well, I don't believe it's as obvious as you would like to believe, this idea of secularism, and that, that faith is this fairy tale thing. Well, you just believe in fairy tales, man. I mean, even if you get into a conversation with somebody about that, about the difference, even within a literary genre between a fairy tale and the Bible and stuff, they'll get real uptight. What? I'm wrong about the basics claim I made? Oh, okay. I guess I don't really know much about fairy tales. I thought I did. But you can either point it out by focusing on evidences and saying, well, look, here's some reasons why it's at least reasonable for me to believe that. Come on, buddy. I'm going to provide some examples. I think these are true, at least for me. I think it's a limp-wristed apologetic, to be quite frank. Doesn't get you very far. But it's one of those things. And look, maybe that's all it would take to, kind of suffice. But no matter what, we've got to go after the assumptions that are prevailing at this point, and that is that the secular space is what is real. That it's not a construct, that it's not just simply an imaginary, but it's real. This is reality. We have to go after that. And because, and I like this too, this was something, I think that certain people, and the fragile people on the conservative, traditional, transcendental side of things, I think it's just like politics, I think it's a horseshoe. There's fragility on both sides. And there's people, their arguments are just, again, poo-poo trash. Sometimes the further they go out on the ledge of the rigoristas, the enthusiasts, the enthusiasms. But here's one. Fragilization is the effect of the greater proximity of alternatives that has led to a society in which more people change their positions. That is, they convert in their lifetimes and or adopt a different position than their parents. People say, you have this a lot with my story, because I was a number of different beliefs before I came to believe in Catholicism. I was raised Pentecostal, but then I embraced Calvinism, and I was a Calvinist for like 10 years. And then within that, there were different shades of that. I would go to different churches depending on where I lived. So, and I wouldn't stick with one denomination. And then become a Catholic. And from Catholic become a sedevacantist. And I think it's fair actually to make a distinction. And then to be an atheist, and then to come back to Catholicism. And people can mock it all the time. I get it, especially from sedevacantists. Oh, that guy's changed his position all the time. Look at that. And you're like, you are not living in the modern world. In fact, the mere fact that you're in the position you are, you've also done that. You've also done that. You've at least converted. You have moved to a group that, historically speaking, you wouldn't be available to you. And if it was, you'd have inquisitors beating down your door. Yeah. But the mere fact that we have a proximity of options, and I think that part of that, and I like that the book brings this up, I think part of that is, in fact, something that can be really pushed down in a very meaningful way, not only to the advent, right, the genesis of Protestantism as a more formal thing within Luther, right, recognizing that even before then there was an underworld of medieval heresy and stuff like that, and enthusiasms going all the way back. But that within that cataclysmic flashpoint of history, that in the progress of that through space and time, and the interplay with politics, the advance of various kingdoms that had a back and forth with Catholicism and Protestantism and the like, the more that happened, and the more that those underlying presuppositions took hold, that it was up to the individual, that the individual and his conscience, that was the final standard, that you would be able to read the scripture, and they can say all day long, oh no, it's the Bible is the ultimate standard. No, it's your interpretation of it. It's your interpretation of it, because your interpretation, you believe, is just the Bible. You don't, if you have an interpretation of it, you think that that's true. You don't go, well, that's my interpretation, but I think it's wrong. I mean, if you do, you're asking for help. That ultimately, if somebody says, well, I disagree with you on that, over time, it began to flesh itself out. And to say, look, why are you, Luther? Why are you killing people who have different beliefs? Why are you killing the Anabaptists? Zwingli, what are you doing? Calvin, what are you doing? On what authority do you do that? If you say that we're a priesthood of believers and we believe in the perspicuity of Scripture and we all of us can just look at it and it's plain as day, and Christ is in me like he's in you, I'm praying and I'm fasting too. So how dare you? How dare you? That idea, as it took hold and as it spread, that idea in the role that religious paradigm played, even within the political systems that came to rule the world, that we began to see more and more this acceptance of saying, there's just different ideas and we got to deal with that. It's like the triumph of Zinzendorf. It's a funky thing. And now we have all of these options. And people say, well, what is the problem? What is the problem if you're in a Protestant paradigm or you're in a modern secular paradigm where all of these options are at least available to you? What would be the problem of being somebody who's convinced of, let's say, believer baptism, but later in their life saying, I actually read some good arguments about that and I became, somebody who believed in infant baptism. And then going over to a different place and looking at their goods and services and saying, look, I believe in Seventh-day worship. You feel compelled by the argument, or maybe you were raised to believe in the pre-trib rapture, but later on you said, I found some arguments compelling to found that it's pre-wrath, and then you realized the pre-wrath was kind of goofy, and you said, okay, I'm post-trib, and then you say, well, it's still kind of weird because millennial ideas and stuff, and where it came from, and the cuckoo weirdos having the visions about raptures and stuff, and you take a more preterist position. In the modern world, so what? In fact, that's normal. And it's to be expected on the position even of the critic that takes the rationalistic stance, the naturalistic, materialistic, rationalistic stance of putting on those monocles to evaluate, okay, the Pope said this, what? Vatican II said this, huh? The Novus Ordo, I'm going to go and I'm going to look up some stuff, some of this ancient scrolls. Hold on, let me go to Google. I'm going to read them myself and come to a conclusion. If that's your standard, and it's not a standard of authority, that would be like, let's say, Ronald Knox, who when he finally decided to convert to the Catholic faith, when he finally did that, what was it based on? Was it because I've looked up a bunch of fantastic arguments and I judged for myself? Is that what he did? Or did he say he got sick and tired of the entire methodology of that and said, I went to a store and on that top of that store said the depot, the goods and services in this place, this is the depot that was founded, that the food here is stocked and shelved, preserved, and given by Jesus Christ, our Lord. You can trust the goods. But if you start with the position of monocle man, and there's no, and if you say, well, no, the conclusion is that, the method is this, my conclusion is true. If you believe that on all those things, and anybody who deviates you is a heretic, number one, it's contestable. Number two, welcome to the club, Pope Michael II. Welcome to the club. I'd like to see your index of forbidden trads, your index of forbidden Catholics. Let's see. Yeah, I am still not seeing. That's going to upset me because Bruce City is in here a lot. Bruce City 2, feel free to. Yeah, I think Bruce City's gone, man. I have no idea. The world will never know. I got Jedediah in there. I got Haley in there. I got all these people, man. Nobody saw it. You guys are killing me. I love you guys. Let's see. In other words, okay, hermeneutic phenomenology's critique of foundationalism and correspondence theories of truth should also underwrite a critique of closed spin. I agree with that, by the way. In particular, this critique calls into question the neutrality and the naturalness of this take on knowledge. And in doing so, it calls into question a lot of the status quo in the contemporary industry of analytic philosophy that often underwrites the rabid naturalism that dominates contemporary philosophy. I don't even need to go over that again. I don't even need to go over this again. Right? However, let me see if I got, let me see if I did it over on this thing, over on this device. No. No, I did not. The guy must have been something else. That bums me out. So the idea of talking about facts without narrative are dead. In fact, was that my first episode on Reason and Theology? The one that saved. The first episode is actually gone. Lofton deleted it. On accident. So he claims, huh? Yeah, so he claims. We know, Michael. We know, Mr. Lofton. But no, I think one of my first episodes was Truth Without Narrative is Dead. In talking about secular age and saying, look, you know, if you have a bunch of factoids and you're in the modern world, you know, and you're out there and you're like, well, this is a fact and here's a fact and here's a fact. And you say, okay, I'll see those facts. I will incorporate them over here and I will show you how it works with this narrative. And that's how they operate. And you go, yeah, so in emphasis on the way we live and move and have our being, the apologetics of everyday life. Rather, what happened is that experience is carved into shape by a powerful theory, which posited the primacy of the individual, the neutral, the instrumental as a locus of certainty. Totally true. Totally true. So what happened in the secular age, you got this powerful theory, this model, right? Posits the primacy of the individual, the neutral, the instrumental as a locus of certainty. In fact, Taylor points out, undergirding this epistemological theory is actually a moral valuation. There's an ethic here, it's a quote, of independence, self-control, self-responsibility, of a disengagement that brings control. And this is why I think it's so appealing to so many on the right, the so-called right. The pull yourself up by your bootstrap crowd. The libertarian folks. I think it's one of the reasons why it's so appealing to that, to the West at this point. But it's also appealing to those on the other side insofar as they don't wish to be considered as if they're not in control. It plays itself out in the idea of the moral commitments, right? Coming of age metaphor, of adulthood, having the courage to resist the comforting enchantments of childhood. You see this all the time. Oh, religion's like a lullaby. Just puts you to sleep. You can't face the facts. You have a hard time with reality, so you make up Santa Claus, and you don't know when to let him go. How often have you heard that type of stuff? The fairy tales. How often have you heard it? And that you need to grow up. Grow up already. There's no God. as if that's how it works. You know, like... but that's the underlying moral valuation with this. That there's a discovery. You've discovered the truth. You've discovered, hey, I figured it out. There's no God, man. Yeah, dude, learn it, man. And then they fall into the other beliefs that have been constructed in that little world, that Looney Tune world of looking on YouTube for videos of scientific prophets and priests. Didn't you see the doom and gloom apocalyptic videos that are coming out on National Geographic? I'm not interested in that, believe it or not. You don't believe that we could be wiped out at any second by an asteroid? And the only people that protect us are going to be, scientists who come up with lasers that are able to shoot them out of the sky? Okay, L. Ron Hubbard. Okay, weirdos. But that's their priesthood. That's their providence. You're still filling a void. Those are your prophets. You have to have some kind of future. I mean, look, that's their apocalypse. That's their eschatology. A weird mix of we're moving forward to the great advancement we're moving forward to the great advancement of a one world government. We're moving forward to the great advancement of a liberal society where everybody can self-identify as they want. Where everybody is radically egalitarian. Yay. Where democracy reigns supreme. All of that kind of stuff. Did you know that the world can be destroyed any moment now? We need to make the lasers. And you're like, so you're literally shining the brass on a sinking ship. But it has that is the thing underneath it. So it's not as if it's neutral. It has its own kind of religious structure. In fact, I would dare to say it probably functions a lot like the covenantal model advanced by those like Gary North, James Jordan, and Peter Layard used to anyway. I don't know anymore. So why are people captivated by the story? What makes them convert? How do we account for the power of bad arguments? What do you guys say? What do you guys say? Yeah. Crimson says, Sky Daddy. Yeah. How many times have you heard that? Yeah, people say, you believe in Sky Daddy God. Yeah, you hear it all the time. The Flying Spaghetti Monster, Cthulhu. You believe in the nonsense, the Big Daddy in the sky, that's it. Passing out lemon drops and lollipops. And most of the time, people aren't so rude about it, but deep down inside me, even new atheism is just toast at this point. People can talk about Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins is yesterday's news. Yeah. And no, Pope Lofton didn't ban the bands. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? 12% said they don't want to see more of me. I don't know who those 12% are, you guys. Well, I'm glad it's not 100. I mean, that's like dictatorial levels. At least you guys, this is obviously a good amount of people. I'm happy with that, by the way. I appreciate it. So why do you think people are captivated by the story? Because they want to be grown-ups. There's a force of an ethical story behind the scientific just so story. Who doesn't want to be a grown-up? Second, exclusive humanism sets up a dichotomy between religion, Christianity, and humanism. Ideas about evidence, which most people don't evaluate, but rather take on testimony and authority. Tell me that this is not true. I think this is probably one of the biggest things. And I think this is true across the board. I think we get this a lot, within Catholicism. You know, this idea. Now, at least it makes a little bit more sense with us because we are, in fact, a church of revelation and authority, hierarchy and structure, stuff like that. So at least it makes sense. At least it makes sense, right? But in regards to those outside of the church, in regards to those people who don't want anything to do with the church, a lot of times they treat it like, I studied all of the different religions. Have you ever heard that before? Yeah, I studied all the different religions, and I came to the conclusion that it's just, it's all just child's play. Nah. No. I've met a lot of people who talk that way. Because I used to be part of a secular group and stuff, and I've been involved in, tons and tons and tons of meetings with lots of people. In fact, meetings that I even helped to host and to moderate. That is so common to hear. And when one person says it, the other one's, oh, yeah. I studied the science. And it's like, dude, you went out there with like beakers and stuff? Well, no. I read some, material. Oh, so you subscribe to various publications. Well, no, I went online. I was on Raw Story. I was on the Huffington Post. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, I was on Facebook. I saw it was an ad about it. Oh, I hear you. I hear ya. Yeah, various meetings. It is totally sus, by the way. Yeah, the meetings. You say, well, what kind of meetings are they? Dude, it's so religious. There's tons of religious underpinnings that are at play with the very reasons why they call them. That's not to say that every meeting is trying to fill the void of, a lack of religion. But when your religion is atheism, you're going to have, it's really tough to have groupishness. It's really tough. There's no maypole, man. There's no 10 Commandments. There's no priesthood other than a group that denies having anything to do with the priesthood. Oh, we're not elders or priests or anything like that. We're just board members. We're just organizers. Function, man. Function. Yeah, Enslaved by Truth says, I studied all religions and opened my third eye and aligned all my chakras and became spiritual. What do you say to the person who says that? Because the secular person say, well, no, that's not true. And you're like, no, man, I've read all of them. I just think that, and I included yours, the secularism thing, and it's just garbage. Chakras are totally the way to go. The Unarius cult. You're like, Unarius, and you're like, oh, yeah. You earthlings believe that this is death. He was actually just transported to the original planet that we came from. And we have a lot of these kind of reincarnated spirits within ourselves. And the way that we understand ourselves is to make videos and movies where we make plays about it to reenact the lives that we lived before so that we can really understand ourselves. We have a lot of work to do. Blah. Real group, by the way, Unarius. We're going to talk about it in our cult series. It's really weird, man. Yeah, it's like the good witch, right? In Wizard of Oz, the one from the north, right? Looking all bedazzling and such, all beautiful. But this lady, imagine that she's like 70 or so, with her makeup's a little bit Tammy Faye Bakerish, a little bit gaudy. Oh. Okay. And so, the idea being, when people talk about evidence, what are they really talking about? What are they basing it off of? I mean, look at how fast people flip the switch. The secular world flipped the switch on whether or not we can self-identify. The video game and the brain talk about sex and gender. And say, wait, how did that happen? Were we following the evidence? No, we were not. What about the disordered beliefs regarding homosexuality and such? Was that following the evidence? Was that like, oh yeah, no, it's not nearly as dangerous? I mean, all these different things. The evidence from arguments about morality or about the physical dynamics of this and whatnot. No, not really. Not really. It was more like, after the ball type talk. You want to know what that is? Just look it up. Look up after the ball, and tell me if that was wrong. Tell me what you think. By the way, that after the ball, the idea put forward by activists in order to make it more acceptable. Tell me where that didn't happen, where it didn't work. People say it's a conspiracy theory. I'm like, dude, we can all point to it and say, no, it's actually like it's not a conspiracy. It's how activism works. Ask Rosa Parks. This isn't a theory that we're convinced of. It's a basic orientation that seeps into our bones. Let's see. Note that Taylor sees the cross pressure not issuing so much from eminence and transcendence per se, but rather a pressure between the draw of narratives of closed eminence on one side and the sense of their inadequacy on the other. And this right here, man. Look at this. I don't know if you can see. Oh, no, you can't see it. You can't really read it because of the lighting and stuff. I apologize. I wrote at the time, I wrote, I'm here now. This is why this book and why this series means as much to me as it does. Because I look at it and I say, not only was I there, I know so many people who are in this place. I know so many people who are in this place where they're caught between the pressures. Take this off for a minute. You know, when people don't believe, there's, as I said, there's always part of them that would prefer to believe, and you'll hear that sometimes. You can hear it. I like when we began the series, he says you can hear it in the music. You can hear it in the music. You can hear it in the malaise. What is it, Postal Service? He mentions. You can mention Bright Eyes, for example. Those are a little bit older. But you can hear this malaise of in almost a sense that something is gone. It makes for the prettiest sad music, to be honest. Melancholic stuff. I like a lot of that. But people live in that world where, on the one hand, they don't go to church. And yet, listen to the things that they complain about. Listen to the things that they worry about. The practical things. You know, if we come down our mountain of apologetics, where we're arguing with a bunch of weird gurus on another mountain, and we sit there and say, hey, why don't we go down and talk to the peeps, right? You'll find that they're really practical considerations. And so, if you're talking to these people and you say, well, what's an issue for you? I'll say what the issue was for me. And because I can speak on my own behalf. And see if it resonates with people you know or things people have told you. I was frustrated because, on the one hand, as a father, I would want my kids, for example, respect your mother and your father, honor your mother and your father. I would invoke that, in fact. And yet, when challenged on what that meant, what does that mean? Who says so? Is that just your opinion? When challenged on that, the best answer I have is, well, but it was just good. I mean, isn't that better? Well, what if I don't think it's better? Well, and at the end, I'm your dad. She's your mom. We own you. We made you. Until you're 18 years old, you live in this house, blah, blah, blah. You've fallen back on pure power. Michael Shermer, he doesn't get it. When I've listened to debates with Michael Shermer, you know, atheist guy, and he's talking to people about, you know, well, you know, this is what I think about right and wrong and how right and wrong can be put together, blah, blah, blah. Dude, at the end of the day, it's a power move. Authority. To be frank, you can't just say it's a good suggestion. Oh, I hear ya. As you're killing somebody. Genocidal maniac in the world. Oh, I hear you, buddy. I just disagree with you. Well, that's wrong. I disagree with that, too. On what basis? Well, I'll argue with you. The primacy of the individual. Yeah, but you got to balance it. Says who? Says me. Says who? Says we. Well, who's we? The ones with the guns. The cancel culture that can ruin your life. They can't avoid authority, but in that world they can't balance it with anything else because it doesn't reside and have its place in God. So you struggle, people. I struggled with that. I was frustrated about this. I was frustrated with things like, you know, if you do something wrong, what's required of you? Especially because it was during the time of cancel culture. What do you do? You know? What's required? I always joke about it. How many Hail Marys and who says so? And what happens when I do them? They have no answer. In other words, just a fanatical mob. So, I mean, it's literally all it is. It's a vengeful, fanatical mob. That is, I mean, you're witnessing an actual rather consistent model of secularism. You know, and so you look at it and you're like, hey, you know, this is wicked bad. It's wicked bad. How about groupishness? That was something that I really struggled with. Saying, I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. I felt isolated like an island that just found a group over here, a group over there. The idea of what bound us together, me and my kids or anybody together in a group bigger than ourselves, was toast. What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? Joel Montero, by the way, yeah. Bro, have you read The Real Life of St. Anthony? I've read part of it, but not the entirety. I think he takes an approach similar to yours when he's confronted by the philosophers and wise men about his faith. By the way, I think it was you, Joel, that asked about enthusiasm about Calvin and Luther and what Knox said about that. I might disagree with Knox on that. Knox did not include them. I need to go back and look to find out the reasons why he did not include them. I said it at the time, but I think he kind of betrays that later when talking about Luther. I mean, I don't know how Luther would not be considered an enthusiast, to be quite frank. Especially once he started taking power and control. And saying like he can decide on the canon of the scripture and all that. I no. But the groupish dynamic, it was tough. And I remember trying to figure out things to say, where can we go to relieve this pressure? And I think I've talked about it here before, saying that it's like a glacier. It's like an iceberg. And at the tip top for us were things that we shared in common with atheist people and groups. And we said, okay, well, you have a belief that there's no God. You have a belief that beliefs in God should not affect the way that society operates, or you have beliefs about science. So you have above the water that little, that little structure above the water that you can see. That was something I shared in common. But the underbelly, the stuff under the water, which is way bigger than what you see above, that was stuff that I had in common with religion. Now, that's not true. I don't think it's the same for everybody. It's not cookie cutter. I'm not doing some cookie cutter apologetic here. There's differences, okay? But for me, that is how it worked out. And so my ideas about family, sex, gender, marriage, parenting, discipline, tradition, customs and courtesies, ideas of political economy, the value of groups in general, the not overemphasizing the idea of I wasn't scientistic. And so to me, it was hard because I was at odds with, and you can live that way for a while, but at times it's a tendency of groups to want to have cohesion. And it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act to balance the one and the many. And you can see within atheism, the drive is the oneness. And in part of that, it's because of their view of cosmology, their view of the origin of things, their view of ontology. What are we? Their view of where we're going, what's our ultimate aim, all this. It all goes back to the one. Strangely, there is a little bit of confusion because on the other hand, I think apologists overemphasize the many, but we're seeing the one come out and they don't know how to balance it. They have to deal with both. Saying that you have an overemphasis on one doesn't mean you are completely devoid of the other. It just says that it's a balancing act that their system cannot maintain. They're going to wobble back and forth and people are flying off the ship. So bad that now Dawkins is out of the ship. They're even throwing, Christopher Hitchens. They're throwing that guy. He's dead. And they're like, no. Did you hear what he said about women not being funny? He's gone. Because they don't know how to balance the one and the many. And the one and the many is essential. So people will experience this because we're creatures in a created order that reflects a God of one and many. And so you go, oh my gosh, okay, how do we do this? And you're going to be let down over and over and over. To various degrees, you'll be let down unless you find yourself in the bosom of Holy Mother Church. That's it. That's part of the reasons why the beauty of any variation of the notion that we won't find our rest until we find it in Him. So Taylor identifies 3 fields to which we'll keep returning. Agency, the sense that we aren't just determined, that we're active, building, creating, shaping agents. Ethics, we have higher spiritual ethics and motives. Aesthetics, art, nature moves us. Because of a sense of meaning, these are not just differential responses to pleasure. I added 4, groupishness, especially in regards to fullness. And by that, in other words, the debate about real fullness is a debate about how to understand our ethical predicament. What counts as fulfillment? What counts as that? If it is just everybody for himself, if that really is what it is, and that there's no sense of a universal, there's no significance to the fact that you, as being in the image of God, that you're reflecting a God that is one in many, that is triune. If there's no significance to that, in how you the expectations or the anticipations or the experience of fullness, well, and look, you're gonna have some people. You know, everything's a bell curve, right? Here are the challenges to the unbeliever: to find a non-theistic register in which to respond to them without impoverishment. What ontology do we need to make sense of our ethical or moral lives? Can we account for moral agency within the confines of materialism? Can a naturalist account make sense of the phenomenology of universalism? The point of these questions, at least in this context, is to displace the spun confidence of some closed accounts. I think it's much more than that. Again, visit my video on presuppositionalism. I don't even know if Lofton changed the title of it. I got to find out. It would have been, I think, 2 or 3 episodes ago. The whole episode is dedicated to that. That's it. Yeah, Taylor emphasizes that one of the central aspirations of modernity is the aspiration of wholeness. Yeah. You have this idea that people want to be whole. It includes both an affirmation of ordinary life and an affirmation of the body and its desires. On the one hand, it looks like religion is a cause for this affirmation of bodily, this worldly life. We've talked about the reasons for that. We live and move and have our being in this world, in fact. This world, Christ came into the world. The incarnation matters. In fact, the world has been groaning for us. Anticipation. On the other hand, others claim that religion is hostile to bodily life. A theology that affirms the goodness of creation would seem to affirm material life. But a theology fixated on heaven would seem to devalue it. Again, the tension. Inevitable. And I have to formulate an argument about this. Maybe it's a kind of ontological argument that, people will debate forever and ever. But the idea that we can expect the tension in a world of creator, created, and within the created, God, or not God and not God, but like God, people. And what happens in that world? Oh, and the interplay between God, who is not contained to the world, but is within the world operating, and the kind of way that history plays itself out, the interplay between worldly and otherworldly forces, the involvement of angels and demons in the world, spiritual realities, principalities and powers. You would expect that. Would you expect anything other than that, actually? Taylor thinks that both are true and tries to appreciate the complexity of the issue. And I love this. On the one hand, he'll argue that behind this critique is a caricature of religion, and especially Christianity, which fails to appreciate the incarnational force of the Christian vision that resists excarnation. I get into conversations about this, and you can see, even within Christianity, you can kind of see this play itself out, right? And by the way, in the comments, modernity modernity in reality is an exaltation of fragmentation. I would not agree with that claim of Taylor. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. What claim exactly? Because I there's a delay. So by the time you guys hear what I'm saying, you know, I'll look up right now and see if somebody can reply. Then it's been a little while. Let's see. Yeah, and somebody said fragmented, skeptic, weak, fragile individuals. What I was saying earlier is that a lot of people on the right, in fact, the harder you go right, the more they're fragile, which is why a lot of them are the tuck the tail and run people. Go out to the fields, everybody, run! The world's coming down! You gotta run away, dude! No. I can't deal with the interplay between, I gotta get those people out of my life all the way. I can't deal with the people who disagree with me. And if you disagree with me, I might need to leave and, go somewhere else for my faith. Those people. Those people. Super fragile snowflakes. Super fragile snowflakes. Victimhood Olympics. Wicked, crazy, bad. And I'll go through some of these comments, by the way. I apologize that I didn't go through more of the comments in real time, because this is more of a relaxed episode. So I truly apologize. Sincerely. Oh, there's a lot of comments, dude. Thank you. Yeah. All right. I'll go through those here in a little bit. According to spiritual transformationists hermeneutic, even our best normal is going to be beset by tensions and unease. Yes, it is inevitable. Even in a realm where Christ is king, we can see that in history. That tension was so vast, in fact, because the more that you exalt, the more that you employ, right, and put into practice in your systems, within your society, ideas and kingdom principles, you are going to have that tension increased insofar as people may not entirely be able to live that out. The church, in fact, provides for the weaknesses of men. So you put this into practice, and what happens? You have a system that is literally, overheating all year. Just guns a-blazing. What do? They have certain seasons. They have certain festivals where all of a sudden the entire order is flipped upside down. Carnival. Fat Tuesday, I think, would be an example of this, even though it's more than just that. White-pilled. I'm surprised to see Jeremiah in this channel. I thought he was totally against the Novus Ordo. No. My kids go to a school, by the way, white-pilled. Thank you, by the way, Reason and Theology, for pointing that out. My kids go to a school 4 days a week that start with the Novus Ordo. Our church is diocesan. It's the primary mass that they do every single day is Novus Ordo, although on Sundays they also have the Latin Mass, which I serve at occasionally. But we have zero opposition to the Novus Ordo as a liturgy. No, there's nothing. I mean, I would criticize, obviously, the cuckoo craziness. I really appreciate, actually, some of the remarks that Michael gave yesterday, talking about the timing of Traditionis, saying it would have been better if you weren't living in a world where there was such craziness surrounding the Novus Ordo. If you were to, and it's one-sided. If you were to say, look, we need to get things into gear where you're not having cuckoo crazy masses, and I don't think that most of them are. I think that's an unfair caricature to say that most of them are. We can find things that we disagree with, things we don't think should be there. But I think that that's unfair to say. It kind of treats it like the all sins are equal thing without recognizing the difference between, even in the Old Testament, laws that sins that would result in the death penalty, or in the New Testament, sins that would result in excommunication. Like, there's differences. So whenever we're evaluating something like that, we need to be better about it. I'll answer more here in the comments in a second. I'll just pop it up now. You can kind of see where I am. So Taylor suggests it's not simply a binary debate between beliefs and unbelief. It's a triangular debate between secular humanism, neo-Nietzschean anti-humanists, and those who acknowledge some good beyond life. As Taylor colorfully puts it, any pair can gang up on the third on some important issue. The triangulation picture might help us get a handle on why strange coalitions can arise in a secular age. And I put in there, let's see if I got it far enough out. I don't know if you can see. Hold on. So I got smiley face, big old hung and smiley face on that, and I put retribalization. Retribalization, because that's what we're dealing with. Where new alliances are coming up, you're seeing that all of a sudden, people, even, I remember the Amazing Atheist talking about it one time, and he was blown away by how many Christians were in his threads. And I'm like, well, because you're going against critical race theory, because you're going against feminism, these kind of crazy feministic ideas coming out now, the trans stuff. You're being very critical of that. And so you're going to find that all of a sudden in this retribalized system, and the SJWs, that's a very puritanical structure. They're going to find themselves more aligned with people, and that's why you see a lot of there's a lot of puritanically. Let me take it back. There's a lot of people within evangelicalism that find themselves on the margins of SJW land, sometimes just neck deep in it. Just true. And so you're going to see a retribalization. You're going to be able to look back. If you're a convert, you'll be able to look back and say, man, it feels like this is not, when I go and I check out, I talk to people that were in my church I used to go to before, that I go and I talk to them, and I don't even recognize it. In fact, some people feel that way about Christianity as a whole, that they say it doesn't feel the same. There's something different about the Christianity as I understand it now, and as we experience it in day-to-day affairs, and the way it's talked about, the way it's understood, as compared to, let's say, the 80s, for example. And of course, this could be said probably going a long ways back, but it's just as true of us. And that this is a problem. Because you have this maximal demand. And I'll end with this. Let me see, hold on. Let me see if I can just emphasize Eminent Frame. Let's see here. Yeah, we already talked about maximal demand, the greatest ideals, and what makes it different. The maximal demand of SJWs versus the maximal demand of apostolic faith is that you might say Christian eschatology buys time to meet the maximal demand. Time exclusive humanism doesn't and cannot have. So we'll end here. We'll end this series on the idea of talking about, we'll talk about this, okay? This is the end of it. Taylor presses the closed eminentist take not by pointing out logical inconsistencies or questioning the veracity of premises, but rather by suggesting that a closed take can't seem to get rid of certain haunting, a certain rumbling in our hearts. There's a specter haunting our secular age, the specter of meaninglessness, which is, in a sense, a dispatch from fullness. And because this will not go away, but rather keeps pressing and pulling, it generates unease and restlessness. This unease and restlessness manifests itself in two domains of modern experience. I'd say the most: time and death. In modernity, we see the loss of higher time. It leaves us to the merely chronological tick-tock of secular time. However, our own experience suggests that the unstoppable homogeneity is unbearable and unsustainable for us as humans. It's doubtful if humans could ever live exclusively in this. If there was no rhythm and no rhyme, if it was just every day, another dollar, it would feel like slave. You would be a slave to just the order around you. What's the purpose of the feast? What are we grateful for? How does that unite us? And that's why we see so many of our feasts and so many of our holy days, whether religious or otherwise, it's either wrapped up with your faith or it's wrapped up with the nation. But either way, you're trying to balance the one and the many. You have something symbolic, something meaningful outside of yourselves and the buffered self that's protecting the individual from the world around them. Something that you can unite on. Something that has the power of, not only from authority, but the power to enforce, the power to bind, the power to loose, the power to make law, and yet at the same time to balance it out by respecting of individuality, freedom. There are two ways that we shape time and thereby give shape to our world: cycles and narratives. This creates rhythms and intensity and rest, but it also creates a frame to help constitute our world and our experience: rhythms, routines, cycles. We have a work day, festival, right? We have even the mini festival of the weekend, spring cleanup, summer vacation, rites of passage like graduation, going to college, getting married. These create a kind of mini kairoi, like a kairos moment. But we also create national stories. These strategies are destabilized and fragilized by the specter of meaninglessness. For while these might be intended to function like the rituals and narratives of pre-modern higher time, in fact, we can be visited by the fear and realization that we're just making this up and that we're papering over an abyss. Thus, what threatens the supposed self-sufficiency of our timekeeping is vapidity. Meaninglessness does not manifest itself as fear, but as boredom, or perhaps the fear of boredom. And death. The secular funeral. They can't avoid it. You want to see a secular funeral, you want to see what it's like and the kind of symbolism and things like that of someone yearning, go and watch the funeral of my daughter. It was done in a beautiful church, Fountain Street Church. If it can, it's not really rightfully called that. It's a funky place, let's put it that way, but it's gorgeous inside. Historical place. We had some beautiful music, flowers, symbolism is awesome. I did the eulogy there, but you can see that even there's a yearning, something, a passage that you're not just simply, you didn't just wake up and open your eyes, find yourself in this crazy place with no purpose or meaning except for what people make up in the zone you found yourself in, only then to close your eyes, maybe not even after, a period of time where you can say how much you enjoyed it. You might simply have, been shot by a guy driving by and accidentally shooting the wrong place. And guess what? Boom, blinkers are off. You dump his bones into the ground for worm food. And the best you got is, it's part of the cycle of life. You keep this thing going. That could be literally obliterated by a meteorite. And you're a meteorite with what? And you say, well, blinkers out for the little blue dot. Within trillions and trillions all over the place. Greater insignificance. People can't live that way. And the idea, I mentioned this before, when Sunday Assembly asked me to do the first speech at their grand opening in Grand Rapids, when I was asked to be the one to do it. So I go in there to Sunday Assembly, a secular group that meets on Sundays. And I went and I did it. And I talked about this very thing. I didn't read the book. I knew it. And said, look, we need to be able to satisfy things to do with giving birth. This thing that we wrap it up in ceremony and we say it's important, it's special, it's set apart. And you're kicking against the goads in a secular age for that. People are all into contraception, onanism, making sure you don't make those babies, limiting them to a small, tiny number, holding out the hope that maybe in your deficiency you're refusing to replenish the line, that maybe science will come up with a way to make it. Or maybe they're just making room for themselves to be downloaded into robot brains. Weirdo talk, but a lot of weirdos right now. But I said, you're going to have that. You have to have something to do with babies, something to do with becoming an adult, something to do with getting married, and something to do with dying. That is literally a universal. These are universal issues. Universal. Secularism doesn't care. The closest they've got, high school graduation. Yeah. High school graduation. Birth, don't really care. Marriage, well, you can just go habitate. It's not really that important. No, there's nothing really super significant about that. In fact, they might even be against it because, global warming and white supremacy. How dare you get married? How dare you? You're getting married? You think you own that other person? Why can't you just guys be life partners? And maybe be in some kind of polyamorous relationship where you really respect the individual's desires. And death, bag of bones in the ground. Worm food. At best, to keep this thing going that they don't really care for. And that can literally go at any minute, that humans are a kind of virus on. And that if it was gone, maybe it would be good. Have you ever thought about that? Maybe give the planet a break from humans for a while. Oh. All right. I think because of this, we can understand more about. I think Charles Taylor's done a good job of helping us to understand how we got here, the interplay between ideas like philosophy, theology, apologetics, technologies, political shifts, right? Economic shifts, imaginaries, presuppositions, and the interplay between all these things, and how sometimes things that end up, the piper comes a piping after a while for decisions that we made that may have been okay, maybe even good in the moment, but they come with a cost. It's not a free lunch. And I think he did a really good job about that. I think it's fair to have disagreements. I have plenty. I think it's fair to disagree with James K. Smith on a number of things, quite obviously. However, I'm grateful to James K. Smith for writing this book. I'm grateful to Charles Taylor for writing the book, for helping provide terms that help us to categorize and conceptualize what we're living, what we're moving in, what we have our being in, because sometimes it's difficult to recognize the water. Sometimes it's difficult to recognize the air that we breathe and the significance of saying, well, man, what is this thing over here? I don't have a term for it. I just experience it in the moment, and I'm not really grasping what this means. Or I'm engaged in debate with people, and they're just assuming that secularism is true, and part of me feels that maybe that is true, and I'm really divided. How did we get here? What is it? Where do we go? How do we live? How do we live in that world where even we have been very transformed by these? Can it entirely go back? Or is that LARPing? Is that just a nostalgic LARP? And if we do go back, to what extent? How does that work? Can we, as Chesterton said, turn back a clock? Or would that be impossible because the mere fact that we'd be turning back the clock? The mere fact that it would be us doing it. And you say, well, does it result in us doing the village? Because even the village had a bunch of pictures inside of a box, secrets that they had to hide, who they'd been, where they were, what they knew. These are questions that I think are important. I think that it helps us understand ourselves, and it helps us understand those people that we're around, our family and our friends, our classmates and our coworkers, to understand them, to say, how can I present the gospel to them? Not only that, but how can they help me, in fact, just by encounters with them? Just by encounters with them, how can I better appreciate the faith that I believe in? It's okay to go to the margins. In fact, we're encouraged to by our Holy Father, in fact. And I love that. So thank you, Charles Taylor. Thank you, James Smith. Thank you for the service of books like this. And if you want to find out more about this, I'll make sure to put it in the comments, and I'll have Michael go ahead and pin that. I'll put this book in there, and I'll also put the book Secular Age, where you'll be able to go and purchase that. I strongly encourage it, and I'm going to try to reach out to James Smith. But right now, let's go real quick to the comments. I don't want to spend forever, but because this is the last episode in this, and because we started late, I'll go ahead and I'll just take some comments here. Let's see. Laura says, I used to be a big TM fan. I haven't watched anything of his in a long time. His thrashing on the Novus Ordo Mass is annoying. Our parish is very revert, right? I'm assuming you mean reverent. Yeah, so is ours. And I get sick and tired of it too. And I actually went so far as to say that people who do that made a mockery of Pope Benedict. Pope Benedict, in his motu proprio, right, that made that mass available to most of the people that are ragging on the Novus Ordo. In that motu proprio, he referenced the fact that there were bishops and priests and people around that were really nervous about making the extraordinary form publicly available like that, where you didn't have to go through the bishop to give it the kind of freedom and leeway that he did. And they said, if you do that, Pope Benedict, then we are going to see an increased number of people who are going to say that Vatican II is baloney because it's an ecosystem. It's not just this. It's come with the baggage of a lot of the leaders in this world, in that movement. And there are leaders there who talk that way. I think that those guys were prescient, in fact. In fact, if history is a guide, it proves they were. They knew the trads better than the trads knew the trads. Better than the trads know the trads now. They're still out there pointing fingers at everybody else. And so, but what did Benedict say? What did Pope Benedict say? He said he didn't think that was going to happen. He didn't think that was at least a sufficient reason to not permit it. Those trads talking that way right now, especially you guys, no offense, you're scumbags. You guys literally proved him wrong. You proved him wrong, and you don't even have the kind of self-awareness to recognize it. So please do us all a favor and shut your mouth. Seriously, man, shut up. You don't have, you know, when they talk against the church anyway, you know, I'm falling back on Father Lassance. They fall back on nothing. They don't have anything with this. You fall back. I fall back on Leo the 13th. I talked about it in the episode. I fall back on St. Gregory the Great and how they as lay people, how they need to deal with issues like this. They ain't doing it. They're taking matters into their own hands because they're secular. Because they're a bunch of rationalistic, naturalistic, materialistic weirdos LARPing. True. Fact. Want to debate me on it? Go for it. Call me up. Call me up, Holmes-Loyce. You know, but they don't understand. They don't understand the role that they play in that. They don't understand the way that Father Lassance, what does Father Lassance say? He says, if you hear somebody, this is his training to young Catholic people. And by the way, this is mega trad. Most of the trads have the missile of Father Lassance. They think it's mega dope, super trad. Maybe the best, most exhaustive missile of extraordinary form of all time. And what does he say? If you're around people that start bashing the church, start bashing the Pope, that you tell them, you can come against me. I don't care if you physically hurt me. I don't care what you do to me, but don't you dare talk about my mother. And that's what I'm saying to them. Don't talk about mama. Don't even get me started right now. Okay. Dub, anti-Novus Ordo is also all flash, no bang. Do not make the mistake of assuming common rad-trad positions have actual arguments behind them. Most of them are emotion plus self-satisfied groupthink. I've learned this. So much of it you bring up and you say, okay, so here are arguments, the Marshall situation, for example. It's very it's very obvious, he's got his syllogism that he doesn't end. And it leaves us on the note of like, Mary has a little lamb, her fleece is white as. He's leaving us with the blues, by the way. It's kind of one of those fancy blues things that you do. You leave off on that dissonant note. What is it, the fifth? Help me out with that. But the idea that you're leaving it off, it doesn't have a resolve. But we all know the answer's in the premise. The answer's in the premise. In fact, the therefore at the end of the syllogism is, to a degree, a little bit redundant. Therefore this, therefore what? Therefore what was in the syllogism. And you're like, oh yeah, right there? Oh yeah, the answer is literally right there. We don't need to know the magic word. And Pandora's box has already been opened. The guy's a joke. And he's late to the party, by the way. He's late to the party. And people are going to laugh at him, trads. The bad trads. They're going to laugh at the guy. And they're going to say, "Oh, you're using this one example of Francis? You took till 2022? He's going to be mocked. He'll adapt. Don't worry. Tragic trads. Traditional Catholicism is good. Rad trad is bad. I actually agree with the so-called traditionalist Catholics on the idea that it's redundant to say traditional Catholicism. Catholicism is, in and of itself, traditional. Rad trad's bad. Rad trad can be bad. But bad trad's a category. Bad trads, man. You got sad trads, mad trads. I would like to consider myself a glad trad. In fact, people say that this show, Paleocrat Diaries, is like the HQ. it's Castle Paleocrat is the HQ of the glad trad revolution, the glad trad movement. Yeah. Barretto, everyone needs to be as chill in life as the little guy. Yeah, my son's totally chill. Just walked right in. He's like, what's up, homie? All right. Brew, perfect example of rad-trad argument-free, solidness-free argumentation. I was going to say this, too. In conversations about Taylor Marshall, and I'm only using him as an example, that when this has happened, so many arguments that I've heard back are simply, well, I don't believe it's true of him. Or he hasn't said the magic word yet. Irrelevant, easily proven wrong. I mean, this is like elementary level playground prattle. It's not hard. This is not profound. It's not easy. It's simply a self-revelation. They are revealing to themselves and to the world their attachment, emotional attachment to an individual. I get it. I want to respect that. But I think that I want to implore them to say, number one, I'm able to say this on the grounds that what we're saying is actually just factually true. In this sense, and a lot of the trad people, they love to use this phrase against the fragility of the left to say, facts don't care about your feelings. And now we can use it to them. Facts don't care about your feelings. However, Catholics do. Catholics care because you're a person, and life is not just simply about fact. We're not data. God made us with emotions. And we need to be able to talk to them in those moments and say, look, I agree, man, it sucks that Taylor Marshall and Patrick Coffin and those weirdos are doing this. That sucks, man. I get it. But the idea of denying that it's true, denying that that's real, and doing the me no see, me no hear, doing that nonsense is garbage. And it's actually uncharitable to the person you say you care about. It's uncharitable to you. Do not set yourself up. Draw that line in the sand that says, I won't go there, man. I won't go there. I'm really sorry. And by the way, do you know how many people probably felt that way about Tertullian? Just imagine. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of them. Those people. How it felt. They had to be just, the people that cared about him, the people that were influenced by him. To feel that, to say, oh my gosh, are you serious? Imagine the hubbub at the time. It had to be tragic. I mean, you have to know that people cried about it, that people defended him. I don't think he's gone too far. You have to know that. Okay, so I'm only seeing what people said about Brew. Jesus hung out with crack addicts and chastised the guys who were too pure to. Liturgical abuses are terrible, and we have to oppose them, but we can't leave the church. Yeah, not sure that's dub. Let's see here. Is the monocle man rich Uncle Pennybags or Mr. Peanut? I'm telling you, rich Uncle Moneybags did not have a monocle. Mr. Peanut did. Yeah. I need to buy a monocle, by the way, just so that I have it as a prop. We got to do it. We've got to do it. 70 votes, 89%. Very good. 70 votes. Do you want to see the Paleocrat on R&T more frequently? Thank you, by the way, for all those votes. I think 90 to 10% is pretty darn good. I'll take it. That's actually, it's pretty good. Pretty happy about it. It would be great to be at truly dictatorial levels of power where it's like 100%, 70 votes, 100%. But I think that making it so it's like, well, look, man, it was 10%, 11%. They said, no, that's legit, man. I straight up won. Yeah, thank you. You guys are awesome. Let's see. Okay. So Bruce said, I'm not a rad trad. I don't know enough in Catholicism to be either rad or non-rad. My thought process comes from lessons in organized sports and Marine Corps. Logic and science. Well, I don't know what those are because they were either deleted or something. I have no idea. I've never been to a single Latin Mass in my life. Bruce City 2 says it. I have been to the new Mass many times, just as I've been in crack houses many times. Well, it's unfortunate about the crack house. The difference between the crack house and the Novus Ordo is the Novus Ordo as a liturgy is the liturgy that's been done by every pope since the Novus Ordo. It's been the liturgy of the Roman Rite. Yeah, the ordinary form. Bishops, priests, all around the world for a very long time now. So there's a difference between that and the crack house. I mean, you may have people who use a certain thing and use it badly. That's true. You had Freemasons and modernists doing the Latin Mass. Think about that. People say the Latin Mass can't be abused. You got Freemasons that were so rampant in the time of Leo the 13th that they were all over the place. Modernists by the time of Pope St. Pius X, all over the place. What Mass were they doing? Oh, yeah, that's right. They were doing the Latin Mass. There's not a silver bullet. I don't know what people are thinking about it. And how do they know that there weren't abuses? And how do they just assume? They just assume it. Let's see. Laura says, this is my morning coffee before homeschool time. We might hit the park later. No Facebook. I am actually quite happy about that. I applaud that. I encourage that even on my my channel, over at my group over at Telegram. I tell people, I say, go ahead and do things in real life. If you want to come into the Telegram chat, at least bring something that you've done and talk about it. Let's see here. Yeah, people keeping it for memories. Yeah, I got it here. Let's see. Dub says, Ben, someone pops up in every conservative circle to keep people from remembering certain traditional Catholic or Western positions. Ben Shapiro is one of those. That's all I meant. Yeah, so apparently conversations about Ben Shapiro. Now, I won't go into too much about that right now. Maybe on one of the shows that I do later this week, I'll be doing more here. Okay. Let's see. Barreto says, sounded like an impression Lofton has done before. Yeah, we probably both been doing impressions for a long time. On radio, you kind of rely on it, to be honest. Like, when you're doing things, like you hear very bad impressions sometimes, like Sean Hannity is typically really bad at it. You have others that are better at it. But I've been doing different impressions for a long time. In fact, for a while in college, I was considering doing voice acting for like cartoons and stuff like that. So I have like a lot more than I use on the show. I should probably incorporate them, to be quite frank. Paleo Craig, God bless you. Thank you, MK Vine. I appreciate it. Yeah. Let's see here. Let's see. Typical of this time, the Latin Mass is so beautiful, so much mystery and devotion, and they completely miss the point. Trads are a typical sign of our secular times. I agree with that. I agree with that. We don't disagree on everything, Andrea. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. It's one of those things. And by the way, if you want me to respond to something, make sure to put in at Paleocrat. People are like, oh, he's just going to look at the comments. No, I'm not going to just look at the comments. You got to go ahead and you got to put in at Paleocrat. That way I'm able to see it. Otherwise, we're in some serious trouble. Andrea says, TLM is not romantic. It's a sacrifice. Yes, it's a sacrifice of love, but is true blood, not a symbolic, beautiful ceremony. Yeah, but you don't want to, you'd be, it's a both and. I mean, come on, be fair. Don't die on some hills, man. Don't die on some of those hills. Yeah. Andrea said, it's always great to see Jeremiah. I voted yes, of course. I appreciate that. I appreciate that you voted yes. And if you have not voted yet, I don't know if it's still open, the poll, you got to do it. You got to go vote. Join the 70 people that voted in the poll. And if you're watching this after the show, make sure to go check it out. Check it out in the comments. Post your view in the comments. Let's see. Your boy EB says, New Age spiritual stuff is just agnostic theism. It's a vague sentiment of religion without a dedication, without the dedication or logic, sprinkled with Eastern stuff. Yeah, we're going to talk about that, about the I Am movement, New Thought metaphysics, how that impacted modern word faith theology and stuff like that. Steak Bake says, life is just a simulation, bruh. The DMT told me so. Yeah, the little green guy. You've seen that little green guy, bro? Oh, man. And people aren't effeminate because they follow the TLM because it's beautiful. That's not effeminate. That's not effeminate at all. God made us with eyes. That's actually kind of, it's one of those things that diminishes the physical beauty because it's an ultra spiritualism and ultra spirituality or ultra supernaturalism. An ultra supernaturalism that kind of diminishes the physical and says, look, but yeah, they know they want that. They want the high altar. They want the altar, but they don't want to say it's beautiful. Are you nuts? There's a lot of people that are literally, it's one of the reasons why people are drawn in by that. The bells, that's gorgeous. The vestments, gorgeous. The domes, the high altars, gorgeous. Pillars, gorgeous. The vessels, all of it. There's no, and the beauty of it is why people have compared it to a dance. That's not effeminate. That's ridiculous. Now, if that's the only reason why, and they say, I just think it's pretty, and that's it, then I think that's just a thing that you need to help somebody at least understand. What is actually happening here? Is it just pageantry? No. Yeah, it should not just be that way, if that's what you're saying. Yeah, okay. Let's see. Yeah, Song of Solomon used beauty, romance, and wisdom interchangeably. Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah, having art should be objectively beautiful. Yeah. I agree with that. No, yeah, so Fundamentum says, I'm a Trademayist. Trademayism. Trademayist. I like that Fundamentum. I appreciate that, buddy. Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah, and Ultramontanist, look, man, I'll go to bat. I'll go to bat for it. I put it out there. I said, look, if people want to say the Ultramontanism they're talking about is one that believes in the absolute temporal control of everything by the Pope, I don't believe that. In fact, I don't think that would be adequately described as Ultramontanism, not in the sense that Vatican I, not in the sense of pre-Vatican I, the Ultramontanists who were making that claim, not in the sense of, what Catholicism has just, always been kind of thing. Yeah. I know that there would be people who disagree with me. That's okay. That's okay, but I'm one of those, look, I just refuse to play the whole card with my glasses, looking down all the time, making sure I read all the encyclicals, I read all the creeds, and I read all the catechisms to make sure that it jives, and that way we can still rest assured that we haven't reached a place with an antipope. Trust me, we're good, guys. We're good. Why don't you start a business where literally your business is just to make sure that we haven't reached that place, or that we have, and that once we have, you can let us know what we need to do so that universally it would be okay to say, oh no, this is what the church says regarding once you've reached that place, that number one, what do you do? How do you live? How do you settle problem resolutions, including this issue, by the way? Including this issue. How do you do it? And what are the terms and conditions for coming back? Is it simply that the Pope has to say, oh yeah, well, I'm really sorry I said that one thing. I went and I confessed it. Or are we back into the SJW thing? Like I'm saying, it's a horseshoe thing where you have the SJWs. None of them, how many Hail Marys? None of them know. There's no standard at all. It depends. One group would say, well, he has to do this. And another group says, oh, no way. You're not recognizing the heresy that I recognize. And they're going to get into these big conversations. Buddy, that's what they're going to do. And there's no mechanism or means. There's no nothing. They're in the same place as the atheist individuals. They're like, well, here's the 10 commandments of atheism. Here are the rules and the commandments for finding us back in a place where we have a pope again. Unless, of course, you're a conclavist. I take time to breathe. I'm just really good at talking. I've been doing it for a long time. On radio, what are you talking about? Yeah. Yeah, this guy doesn't take it. Okay. It might be done on purpose of sacredness, but the liturgy seems to be just for show. I mean, if you say what's required for the Mass, it's actually much less than what you see during the liturgy. The liturgy is a prayer. And the prayer has motions and movements. And, if you say it's for a show, most of them, a lot of them are done in private. Yeah. So, I'm not entirely sure. Germanica says, will we see more ducks? Will we see more ducks? What is that about? Are we going to see more ducks? Okay. And Yuan, I don't know how you pronounce it. Michael, you look different. Yeah, definitely looks different. So, okay, I'm really grateful for all of you, okay? Really, really grateful for all of you. Let's see here. Oh, there we go. Thank you so much. And yes, liturgy is a prayer. Yeah, well, the Mass. The Mass. The liturgy, if you want to talk about, like, the vessels and everything else, yes, they're all reflective. They're all symbolic. Even the bowing or the kneeling, the genuflection, all of that has a function. Each and every bit. I compare it sometimes to an operating system. And the operating system, every single day, the way that we cross ourselves, the way that we put our hands together, the words that we pray, the act of contrition, any of these things, when we do that, right, it's making sure that the basic system, the way that the system is operating, is functional. And it's a constant reminder. It's a constant reminder of why we are who we are, what we believe, what we don't believe, and the reasons for both. So yes, I love liturgy, by the way. And I don't mind the mix, the interplay between the visible and the invisible. In fact, it's one of those tensions that I'm quite grateful for. I think that it's yet another reason why we can rest assured that we live in a world that on the one hand has one, the one hand has many. That there's a hierarchy, and yet at the same time, it's not completely absorbing the individuals. That there's a balance of these things, global and local. Things that are old and things that are new, the connection between them. And the idea that we live in a world, we live and move and have our being in a world where you have the one and the many. We're creatures created in the image and likeness of God. And we're surrounded by things that are not God, just like us, but that are not like God, like us. I think liturgy is just one of those things. All right, until next time, really grateful for all of you. And as I always say, never give up, keep on smiling, and memento mori.
I wanted to make people dream bigger thoughts.